Okay, guys, I'm going to walk you through doing a 1040 EZ tax form. So whenever you hear the term doing your taxes, or have you done your taxes, or you're going to do your taxes, you use these 1040 forms to do your taxes. Ultimately, what that means is you are trying to figure out how much tax did I pay compared to how much tax should you have paid. Okay, so we are going to do the 1040 EZ form. It is exactly as it sounds. This is a very easy form to fill out. For most of you, if not all of you, this would be the form that you would fill out to do your taxes. What we're going to do with this form is we're going to do one of the scenarios in your packet. Okay, the scenario we are going to do is scenario number 1 with the person Joseph K. Red. For this semester, it is on page 20 of your packet. Okay, so if you flip to page 20 in the packet, you're going to see the W-2 form, a 1099 INT form, and a little bit of a sentence or two scenario on some other information to do Joseph K. Red's taxes. You're also going to see when you flip to that page that for whatever reason, when we made copies of this packet, it did not copy over very well. I don't know why that is, but you can barely see the numbers for the W-2, and you can barely see the numbers on the 1099 INT. So if you're having a hard time looking at that, what I would recommend doing is going to our Canvas homepage, go to the taxes module here, and then I have our taxes unit packet right here. So you can pull up the unit packet, PDF version of it, and then you can scroll down to where these scenarios are. Okay, it should be right in here. So this is scenario 1, Joseph K. Red, and you can obviously see the numbers a lot better, and you can kind of expand it out. And what I do is I have it right here so we can see it here. Okay, so this is the scenario that we're going to use with Joseph K. Red. When doing these forms, the easiest thing to do is just start at the top and work your way down. The forms will give you the directions on what you need to do. Okay, so you can see this 1040 EZ form. It tells you that this is the income tax return for single filers and joint filers. So people that are single or people that are married can use this form if they have no dependents. So this is the income tax return for single and joint filers with no dependents. So if you were to have a dependent, if you had a child, you cannot use the 1040 EZ. You would have to use the 1040A or just the general 1040 form, which is a little bit longer than the 1040A and the 1040 EZ. So Joseph, he has no dependents. We can use this form. So if you go back to his W-2, this sheet here is going to give you all the information you need to do his taxes. Okay, we have this little blurb up here that Joseph worked as a gas station attendant, that he's single, so he's not married, and he is claimed as a dependent on his parents' tax return. That is a key thing. This is claimed as a parent, is claimed as a dependent on his parents' tax return. We're going to get to that in a second, but that is key in this scenario. So his parents are going to claim him as a dependent on their tax return. When they do their taxes, he'll be considered a dependent. He also wants to contribute $3 to the presidential election campaign fund. I'll explain what that is. And then the bottom half is a 1099 INT. And I'll kind of go in a little bit more detail when we get to this point on the 1040 EZ form. So looking at his W-2, we have this information up here. This is where he worked. So he worked at Super Service Station. There's their address. Here's Joseph's information. So there's his full name, his last name, and this is his home address. We'll get to these numbers here in a second and what they mean. And then up here is his social security number. Okay. So going back to the 1040 EZ form, just start at the top, work his way down. So we want his first name, his first initial, Joseph K. Red. Anytime you're filling out these forms, you want to use your full name. Okay, so this guy, he might go by Joe or Joey, but for these purposes, we're going to put his full legal name in there. His social security number, 987-00-4321. And just as a reminder, you can get that right here on the W-2 form. Underneath, if he had a wife or a spouse, you'd put in their legal name, last name, and their social security number as well. His home address, 426 Rutherford Court, Apartment number is in Plainfield, Illinois, 60544. And once again, you get that information here on the W-2. Okay. The next thing we need to look at is this presidential election campaign. It says check here if you or your spouse, if filing jointly, want $3 to go to this fund. Checking a box below will not change your tax or your refund. Ultimately, what you're saying here is if you check this box, is you're telling the government that you just want $3 to go into this fund, that anybody who's running for president, they can pull money out of that fund in order to have money to run for president. This doesn't charge you anything. It doesn't take any money away from your refund. What it's basically doing is you're telling the government to take $3 of their tax money and put it in this fund, as opposed to, say, putting the $3 in the military or education or social services or whatever. Okay. So in our scenario, it said we wanted him to check the box, so we will check that box. Okay. Looking further down on this form, if we scroll down a little bit, you can kind of see it's broken down into a handful of sections. You have this income section, you have this payments, comma, credits, and tax section. You have a refund section, an amount you owe section, and then ultimately the spot where you can sign it. Okay, so this top portion here is where we're going to input all of the income that Joseph K. Redd had for the year. Okay, any income you bring in, you should declare because you have to pay tax on it. All right, so if we start at number 1 and work our way down, it's going to tell us what we need to do. So it says wages, salaries, and tips. This should be shown in box 1 of your Form W-2, and then attach your Form W-2. So when you would mail this off to the IRS, you would attach your W-2 form as proof, so you're not lying about the numbers. So if we go to his W-2 form, we look in box 1, right here's box 1, we could see he's got $5,250. So his gross pay for the year was $5,250. And we put that number right here, 5,250. This column is where you put the cents. One thing to be aware of in real life, your W-2 might have $5,249.65. The IRS wants to deal with whole numbers, okay? So you would not put in what I'm putting in here right now. You would not put in $5,249.65. What the IRS wants you to do is they want you to round to the nearest dollar. Okay, so we would eventually, in this scenario, we would round up to that 5,250. So in real life, just be aware, round to the nearest dollar, up or down. Okay, so that's it for line 1. It says taxable interest. If the total is over $1,500, you cannot use Form 1040-EZ. So if you make more than $1,500 in interest income, basically money that you have sitting in your account at the bank, for example, you can't use this form. You'd have to use the 1040A or just the general 1040 form. So if we go back to the scenario and you scroll down, this is the form that's your interest income form. Okay, if you earn enough interest income on your account at your bank, for example, your bank will send you this form in the mail. Okay, they will also send this form to the IRS, so the IRS knows that you have interest income that you need to pay tax on. So here's this bank. He used Chase Bank in Plainfield, and he earned $35 in interest income. In real life, you are probably not going to earn $35 in interest income on your account in a year. This would mean that he has thousands upon thousands of dollars in a savings account. Okay. But for our example here, let's just assume that he did earn $35 in interest income. They didn't withhold any tax on it, so he has to pay tax on this income. So what you do is you plug that into line 2, $35 of taxable interest. Okay, line 3 is unemployment compensation. So if for whatever reason he collected unemployment money, he would get a tax form that would tell him as such, and he would have to pay taxes on that, and you would put that here. They also have this Alaska Permanent Fund dividends. What this is anybody who's a legal resident of Alaska, they get a certain amount of money each year from the oil companies because they are mining for oil and they're tearing up the environment in Alaska. So they give them thousands of dollars that they have to count as income. Joseph K. Red does not live in Alaska. He does not have any unemployment compensation. So you can leave this line blank if you'd like. I usually just put a dash in just because I think it looks a little bit cleaner. So now line 4 tells you to add lines 1, 2, and 3, and that's your adjusted gross income. So that should be $5,285. So that is his income. That's how much money Joseph K. Red made during 2015. That's his adjusted gross income. Okay, next on line 5 is where you guys get confused. A lot of people get confused here, so I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can on this video. So line 5 says, if someone can claim you or your spouse, but if someone can claim you as a dependent, check the applicable box below and enter the amount from the worksheet on the back. Well, we've already said back in our scenario, if we go back to it and scroll up, that Joe is single and is claimed as a dependent on his parents' tax return. So somebody can claim Joe as a dependent. So what we want to do is we need to check this box, okay? So it says check the applicable box below and enter the amount from the worksheet on the back. And I'll scroll down to get to the back of the worksheet here in a second, but let me explain what is going on here. If no one can claim you as a dependent, you get to enter $10,300 if you're single, or $20,600 if you're married filing jointly. You'll just see that this $20,600 is just this number right here, double, okay? What this $10,300 is it's your standard deduction of $6,300 and your exemption of $4,000. It's those two numbers combined. Okay, so if you remember back from the notes, the government or the IRS gives everybody at minimum the standard deduction, which is $6,300. What that basically means is the government's not going to tax $6,300 of your income. They also give you exemptions. So for everybody that you need to support with your income, for the tax year 2015, the government's going to give you $4,000. So if you had you and a spouse, each person would get the $6,300 standard deduction, and each person would get $4,000, and that would give you the $20,600. If it is just you who is single, you would get the standard deduction of $6,300 and the exemption of $4,000, which gives $10,300. Okay, where it gets tricky though is if someone can claim you as a dependent, you have to check this box, because ultimately what the IRS is not going to do is they're not going to give you the standard deduction and the exemption, okay, because your parents would get the exemption. So ultimately what they're going to do is they're going to give you only the standard deduction. Okay, but what you have to do is you got to figure out what is that standard deduction going to be, and that's where we have to enter the amount of the worksheet on the back. So be aware, the only time we do anything on the back of the 1040 EZ is if someone can claim you or your spouse as a dependent. That's the only time we flip the sheet over and try to figure out the numbers on the back of the sheet. If no one can claim you as a dependent, then you would enter $10,300 on this line right here if you were single, or $20,600 if you're married filing jointly. So since his parents can claim him as a dependent, we need to scroll down and figure out, okay, what's going to be his standard deduction. Okay, and all you do is you read the directions. So it tells you use this worksheet to figure out the amount to enter on line 5 if someone can claim you as a dependent. So his parents can claim him as a dependent, so we have to figure this out. So it tells you amount, if any, from line 1 on the front. Well, if you scroll back up and look, line 1 is $5,250. Okay, so we will put $5,250. You're going to add $350 to that. That's now going to give you $5,600. What the IRS says is you have a minimum standard deduction of $1,050. Okay, but line C says enter the larger of line A or B. Well, obviously, line A is larger, so we're going to enter that one here on line C. All right, line B says the maximum standard deduction. It's like we said earlier. The standard deduction for the tax year 2015 is $6,300. So if you're single, you get to enter $6,300. So that's what we can enter here. That's the maximum standard deduction he can take. Now for line E, it says to enter the smaller of line C or D. Well, since line C is smaller, that's going to end up being his standard deduction. The government's not going to give him the full standard deduction because he didn't even meet that. His income did not even equal $6,300, so he's going to take this standard deduction here. Wrapping this up, exemption amount, he doesn't get that $4,000 exemption because his parents get that $4,000 exemption. So the government's not going to give that $4,000 out twice. So this $4,000 that he would get if he wasn't claimed as a dependent goes to his parents. All right, so lastly, the last thing we do here, reading the directions, we add lines E and F, and you enter the total here and on line 5 on the front. So 5,600 plus 0, 5,600, we enter that total here and on line 5 on the front. So what this now means is this is Joseph K. Red's standard deduction. This is the amount of money he gets to take out of his income. Okay, and you're going to see something here that, well, his standard deduction is $5,600. He only made $5,285. So what that ultimately means is Joseph K. Red has no taxable income, which is good. That's your goal ultimately when we're doing this part and in real life. Your goal in real life is you want to try to get your taxable income as close to zero as possible. So since he didn't make that much money, Joseph K. Red only made $5,285 in income, he got a standard deduction of $5,600. So in all reality, he has no taxable income. And that's what it tells you right here. Subtract line 5 from line 4. If line 5 is larger than line 4, and line 5 is larger than line 4, enter 0. So he has no taxable income. And we'll come back to this here in a second. Okay, so his taxable income is 0. Let's scroll down now and get to the payments, credits, and tax portion. So now we have line 7. Federal income tax withheld from Form W-2 and 1099. So if we go back to our W-2, you can see in here, federal income tax withheld. So throughout the year, Joseph was getting paid every 2 weeks, and they were taking federal income tax out of every check. In total, through the year of 2015, they took out $130 in federal income tax. So he paid $130 in federal income tax, and that's what we put right here. Scroll back down to the 1099. We have no federal income tax, so the bank didn't take any income tax out, so you don't have to worry about anything there. So in total, Joseph K. Red paid $130 in federal income tax. All right. Earned income credit, for what we're going to do in class, you don't need to worry about this. Ultimately, what this is, it gives you credit if you don't make that much money. Don't worry about it for what we're going to do. This non-taxable combat pay election, don't have to worry about anything with that. So ultimately, what we need to do is add lines 7 and 8A. Well, we can put a dash there for a 0, a dash here for a 0. So what we have, his total payments for taxes is $130. That's how much Joseph Red paid in income tax in 2015. A couple other things to be aware of here now is line 10. Okay, this is where you actually have to look up the amount of tax that he should pay. Okay, so he did pay $130. What we need to figure out is, well, how much should he have paid? So use the amount on line 6 above to find your tax in the tax table in the instructions. You may want to make a note here, an asterisk here. This is where you look up your income in the tax table. So I'm going to show you, even though we wouldn't need to do it because he has no taxable income, he wouldn't need to pay any tax. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so the tax table is available to you on Canvas. Let me pull it up here under our tax module. Okay, so you see I'm still under the tax unit packet. If I go back to our tax module, we have the 2015 federal tax tables is right here. Okay, so you do is you click that and it'll pull up the PDF for you. Okay, so there's the PDF and you can scroll down and find it. So I have it right here. Okay, so this is how you would actually look it up to find his taxable, or the tax he owes based on his taxable income. So he has $0. He's not going to pay any tax. So Joseph K. Red should not have paid any tax at all throughout the year. Okay, so the tax, use the amount on line 6. Okay, here's our line 6 right here, $0. To find your tax in the tax table, then enter that tax amount on this line. Well, he didn't need to pay any amount of money. Okay, so the $130 he got, he's going to get all of that back because he was not required to pay any tax. This last part here, this healthcare individual responsibility, with the Obamacare mandate, you are required by law to have health insurance. If you don't, they penalize you on your taxes. We're going to assume for everything we do, for all of these scenarios and for the test, that you have full health insurance, that you're not going to pay any penalties. We'll talk about these penalties when we get to the health and life insurance unit in about a month or two. Okay, so last thing we need to do here, you add lines 10 and 11. So his total tax is $0. So Joseph K. Red owes no tax. He owes the federal government no tax. Okay, so what we got to do is just finish up this form. So his refund, if line 9, let me scroll up so you can see it here. If line 9 is larger than line 12, subtract it. Line 9 is larger than line 12. This is your refund. So Joseph K. Red is getting back all of his tax money. Ultimately, he just didn't make enough money. So he did not make enough money to meet his standard deduction. So he got to deduct the first $5,600 of his income. He didn't even make that. So he has no taxable income, which in turn means he gets all of the tax money he paid back. Okay, and the rest of this stuff you could fill out, make these numbers up. This would be like your routing number at your bank to get the money directly deposited. You're going to go into your checking account. Here's my account number. And then this money would get directly deposited into your account. If you didn't put any of this stuff here, you would literally get a check from the IRS and you would go and you would cash it at your bank. Remember, you only fill out this part if you get a refund. There are times where you don't pay enough money in your federal income tax. So for example, if you put the wrong number on the W-4 form when you first got your job, you put like a 4 instead of putting a 1, that means they didn't take enough tax out that you're going to owe the government tax money. Okay, and that's where you would put then the amount you owe here, and then you look in the instructions on how you go about paying that and sending them a check. Wrapping this up, the things you need to make sure that you do on the hard copy of it is make up a signature for Joseph K. Red. Just put today's date down whenever you do it. His occupation, we didn't tell you what his occupation was, so make it up. I'll just put sales, daytime phone number, make that up. You sign it off, and you're pretty much good to go for what we need to do. This last part would be if you paid somebody like an H&R Block or an accountant or something like that, you paid them to do your taxes and they screwed up, they're the ones that would get in trouble, not you. Okay, so this is how you do the 1040EZ form. Obviously, as you can see, it's pretty easy to do. If you have any questions on it or you can't remember how to do it, just go back, watch this video, and hopefully it'll give you some help. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the 1040A video.